how in the world did they wear all these layers, and why did they wear all these layers of clothing? And you go into that in the book, and I would love to speak on, or have you speak on that. Why so many layers of clothing, and how did they take care of it?
Uh, it's another one of these. I've always been really interested in some of the kind of mythologizing of the 19th century that has happened, especially around women's wear. I think the notion that these women were kind of passive bystanders in their own lives because of what they wore
Mm.
is a real fallacy. The layers is interesting. I mean, there's certainly, this is a very much a kind of the idea of respectability in the 19th century is bound up with all sorts of complicated kind of complicated
Mm.
ideas that were starting to that were starting to emerge at that time. But I think primarily what's important is that women did have agency over their dress. So this wasn't about men kind of instructing them that they had to wear layers and that they had to winch their waists with ill-fitting corsets, and that they would then spend their time fainting onto couches. That didn't happen. Not many women tight laced. Tight lacing was a very kind of specific practice. Women wore corsets to support their bodies, and they wore the layers as part of this kind of notion of respectability. But they definitely lived full and active lives, not equal lives, of course, and they had horrific times in many, many ways. But I think dress was something that they did have a great deal of agency over. And I think, again, that's why it mattered to Anne. She was recording an area of her life and her friends' lives that they had a great deal of control around. And cloth kind of was important for that reason as well.
Mhm. You even discuss how, and it's something I'd never thought of, when they are wearing these layers of clothing, it's almost as if the outside layer that Anne is documenting in this diary is kind of just like spot cleaned and it's kept as pristine as possible. It's the under layers that are meant to be kind of like what we wear with t-shirts and stuff like that, where
Yeah,
you will sweat in those
yeah,
and they need
yeah.
a deeper cleaning, right?
Yeah, and that is of course the important functional reason for having those kind of layers, which is that the cotton undergarments, the shift or the chemise that you wore next to your skin, the linen drawers, those kinds of things were things that could be washed, could be laundered more easily. Obviously, it's all subjective and relative to your time and place. And then it meant that the outer layer was something that you would have very sophisticated ways of looking after. I think, again, another myth is that people couldn't effectively look after their garments in the 19th century, and that therefore it was that people just got used to not smelling clean, and that's not true either. You know, their undergarments were laundered pretty frequently for most people, and the outerwear, women had all sorts of sophisticated kind of recipes that they would have handed down or learn from other women about how to remove candle wax from from cloth, or how to get grease spots out. The kinds of knowledge that I think has been lost now. My grandmother was brilliant at it. She had all sorts of, I think perhaps she was one of the last generations to have attained that knowledge from her mother and grandmother.
Mm.
So the knowledge that they had to care for clothes in a much more considered way was something that perhaps we've lost now.
Mhm.